Every legendary director has a feature film that almost nobody's ever seen. For Martin Scorsese, it wasn't Taxi Driver, it wasn't even Mean Streets. It was actually a scrappy black and white film that started out as a student project. Today we're going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's first ever feature film, how he got it made, what nearly killed it, and what you can take away for your own filmmaking journey. Let's rewind to New York in the 1960s. Martin Scorsese grew up in Little Italy in New York. He was surrounded by Catholicism, the street life, and most importantly, the movies. He was a sick child, so instead of playing sports with kids his age, he spent most of his childhood at the cinemas. He eventually went to film school at NYU, which at the time was not an obvious choice for aspiring filmmakers, but for him it had three things that he really needed: access to cameras, film stock, and most importantly, other creatives that were on a similar journey to him. At NYU, he started making short films with his friends, experimenting with editing techniques, camera movements, and music, telling stories about the world that he grew up in. If you're in film school or just shooting short films with your friends on the weekend, this is exactly where Scorsese was back then. Not rich, not connected, just hungry and learning everything that he could. His first feature film didn't actually start as a feature at all, really. It started as a short film. The story centered around a young Italian-American guy dealing with themes such as love, guilt, and friendship. Scorsese worked on this project over a number of years. He would shoot, edit, recut, rethink, and add scenes back and forth. Instead of treating this film school project as something disposable, he kept building on it and expanding the scope. This is important. His first feature film wasn't actually a feature at all. It was just a short film that refused to stay small. He didn't wake up one day with funding for a 90-minute feature film. It was just a short film that he expanded upon until he ended up with a feature. He just kept shooting and editing and shaping it until one day he ended up with the feature film. Scorsese shot this with a tiny budget, using friends and people in his circle and emerging actors. One of the key collaborators at this point was actually Harvey Keitel, who would end up becoming a frequent partner in some of his future films. Because there was no big producer bankroll in the project, it wasn't a neat 4-week schedule. It was a stop-start process. They shot whenever they could get their hands on the equipment or whenever people were available. The film was literally built in pieces over years. If you ever tried to make a film in fragments, weekends, holidays, stolen hours, you're doing exactly what Scorsese had to do back then. It wasn't glamorous, it was just persistence and patchwork. At some point, Scorsese realised that this small film school project wasn't actually a short film at all. It was actually a feature film with enough material for a full-length movie. The project eventually became known as Who's That Knocking at My Door? But finishing a film is one thing, getting it distributed is a completely different kettle of fish. He had to re-edit and repurpose the story in a way that it could be packaged and sold. Along the way, he worked with different distributors who all had their own ideas on what it would take to make this project marketable. Eventually, after a whole lot of hard work, tough years, shooting around everyone, and finally getting this made, Who's That Knocking on My Door got released. And it wasn't an overnight success. It was not a smash hit. It had a very rough path to get released and struggled to find a big audience. But it did do something very important. It proved to everyone that he could actually do a full-length feature film, and it got him noticed in the industry. People saw his visual style and themes that he would come to develop further, such as Catholic guilt, masculinity, the street life, and the way that he used music and editing. That calling card helped him find more work, such as editing gigs, television projects, and eventually a little film called Mean Streets, which most people would consider his real breakout project. But without that scrappy little feature, there's a very good chance that other films that came afterwards, such as Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, Casino, Silence, Wolf of Wall Street, none of these films could potentially have never been made if he didn't open the door with his first feature, Who's That Knocking at My Door? No pun intended. So what can you actually take away from Scorsese's story about making his first feature film? First, start small and let it grow. He didn't start out with budget for a full-length feature film. He started out as a short film, and he didn't wait permission to make a proper first feature. He just worked with what he had, and he tried to make do with all the different resources that he had at hand. Secondly, use your world. He told a story set in the culture and the neighborhoods that he knew. This authenticity is what made his voice stand out. And finally, your first feature film doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It just has to exist. His debut is rough, some would call it uneven, and it's far from his best work, but it did its job and it opened the doors that he had to open. So that's how Martin Scorsese got his first feature film made. A student film that stretched over years and built out of friends, borrowed time and stubbornness. It didn't blow up the box office, but it proved that he could do it, and it was enough to change his life. In this series, we'll be breaking down how different directors got their first features off the ground, so you can see that almost no one starts with perfect conditions. If there's a director that you want covered next, Spielberg, Nolan, Greta Gerwig, whoever, drop their name in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss out their origin story.